Now I will demonstrate that this law of tendency holds true and operates in the market without anyone's direction from above, and I will demonstrate it a contrario sensu. That is, I will ask what would happen if a worker, or any productive factor, if we are discussing not the labor factor, but the rent of another productive factor, like the price of renting a computer or a tractor, what would happen if that factor were not paid what we have called the discounted marginal value product, or the present value of that factor's contribution to the process of production? In the specific case of labor, what would happen if an entrepreneur paid a worker less than his discounted marginal value product? Well, something very simple would happen. If for the additional or marginal hour of the shoemaker's labor, I pay him less than the 90 euros his work contributes for me to the production process, then clearly that marginal hour brings me a very handsome entrepreneurial profit. If I pay the worker 70 for that hour instead of 90, and he contributes to the production process 2 pairs of shoes at 50 euros a pair, 100 euros in 1 year, and the value of that contribution, discounted by the interest rate, is 90, then obviously by hiring him for that last hour, I have made a pure entrepreneurial profit of 90 minus 70, 20 euros. I have paid him less than the value of what he has produced for me. Since entrepreneurs are eager to make a profit, either I or one of my competitors will say, I am not going to stop there. Why only 20 hours? From 19 to 20. I am going to hire another unit of labor factor. In other words, 1 more hour. I made a killing on the last hour. I made a clear 20 in pure entrepreneurial profit. I am going to hire another hour. Instead of 20 hours, 21, in order to accumulate another hour's worth of profit. And if I do not do that, a competitor will. So, I hire the worker for another hour. And if the circumstances have not changed, and I can pay him another 70 euros for that additional hour, and I can again sell the shoes for 100 euros in 1 year, and their present value is 90, I will bring in another 20 euros in profit. But why stop at 21 hours? If I have just made a profit of 20 on the 20th hour, and another 20 on the 21st hour, I am going to hire him for another hour, the 22nd hour, and so on. But do you know what happens then? As I demand more and more hours of a factor's services, and here the individual determinants of price come into play, other things being equal, as the demand for any good or factor increases, the price tends to increase. If with the additional hours I am producing more and more pairs of shoes, what do you think will happen when that growing supply of shoes, more and more units, reaches the market? Other things being equal, as the number of units for sale rises, the price tends to fall. Watch how I'm moving my hands. There will come a point when I will have to pay the worker more and more for each additional hour, and the price at which I will be able to sell each pair of shoes I put on the market will be lower and lower. Eventually, the two will coincide. In other words, for the marginal hour of labor, I will pay the worker his discounted marginal value product. But what if I make a mistake and miss the mark? And this happens frequently, because the entire market process is carried out by entrepreneurs in an environment of uncertainty, in which they attempt, by trial and error, to find the combinations which yield the largest profit. And what if I go too far? What if I have been carried away with optimism? The worker sells himself too well. I think he is going to be super productive. I overpay him. And then, when harsh reality sets in, he contributes little for me to the process of production. Or what if I make a mistake on the number of units, and I go too far? What if, instead of 20, 22, 23 hours, I hire the worker for 40 hours? And for the 40th hour, I have to pay him 120 euros. The year passes, and when the shoes from that marginal hour arrive, I realize I can sell them for only 40, because the market is so flooded with shoes. 2 pairs of shoes at 40, 80 euros, and I pay the worker 120. What is the moral of the story? I am losing money on that last marginal hour of the worker's labor I have hired. That sends a message to me. Look out, you have gone too far on the volume of production. You are producing too many units. So many that you must sell them at a very low price, yet you have incurred very high costs. What is that telling me? That I must reduce the volume of production, decrease the number of units. If you go too far, you lose money, and you must cut back. If you cut back, fewer consumer goods will reach the market, and thus their price will tend to recover. Also, because you are demanding fewer hours, factors of production are freed, and therefore their price will tend to drop. So the two will tend to become equal. What is the moral of the story? The entrepreneurial drive to obtain profits determines that each of us is paid the present value of his or her contribution to the process of production. In other words, what we call the discounted, by the interest rate, marginal value product. If we fall short on the volume of production, we lose a potential profit, and our own drive to bring in more profit will lead us to hire more labor. However, it will cost us more and more, and we will be able to sell the product at a lower and lower price. How far will this go? Up to the point at which the two are approximately equal. And what if I make a mistake and go too far? The opposite will happen. The price at which I will be able to sell the consumer good will be insufficient for me to recover the cost I have incurred in paying for the services of the productive factor. This will tell me that I have gone too far on the volume, and that I must draw back or reduce the volume of production. For instance, a few years ago, General Motors was producing millions of cars, but it was going bankrupt. What did the company do? Well, it suspended payments, let half of its people go, and cut production by 30%, and the company became profitable again. It had gone too far. The price at which it could sell the marginal car was insufficient to cover all the costs. Well, with a degree in business administration and management, in the near future, you will find yourselves involved in a great variety of companies, in every part of every productive sector. And one of your essential goals will be to discover the volume of production that will enable you to generate the largest possible entrepreneurial profits without going too far, nor falling short. And as a result, each of the factors of production which contribute to that process will be paid its discounted, by the interest rate, marginal value product. Or in more colloquial terms, that marvel I talked about at the beginning of class. Each of us tends to be paid the value of what we contribute to the production process. So, if we wish to earn more money, the secret is quite simple. What we must do is contribute more and more value to the company we are involved in. That is the only way to be successful in life. Yes? You have a question. Now, when we are seeing computer prices fall dramatically, can we really say that the factor tends to be paid the value it contributes to the process of production, or is there a technological factor for innovation? Well, in economics, all laws are ceteris paribus laws, other things being equal. If we keep all circumstances equal, then each factor of production, in the case you have just mentioned, a computer, will be paid for its services its discounted marginal value product. This is called the rent of the corresponding equipment good. Many times, such goods are sold. Other times, a rental contract or lease is signed. The purchase price of the whole good, or the capital value of the good, tends to be equal to its future flow of returns. If the machine is highly productive, it will have a very high capital value. So, when entrepreneurs are studying how much it costs to produce that capital good, if they find that, due to technological innovations, etc., it costs a fraction of the good's future flow of returns, then entrepreneurs will rush in droves to produce equipment until the price rises at the margin. And because the supply is much larger, the expected revenue, or rent, falls. The same thing happened with apartments in Spain a few years back. What happened? Well, apartments had an extremely high present value, because the interest rate was virtually zero. Entrepreneurs leapt into action and said, "Hey, it is super profitable to buy land and bricks and to hire architects." So they jumped to build 1 million apartments, for which they later found out there was no demand, because the whole thing had been due to a process of artificial credit expansion and an artificial reduction in interest rates. The theory is impeccable. It explains the law of tendency, which indicates that each factor is paid the value of its contribution to the production process. However, you must consider this in the context of an overall comprehensive analysis of the economic process, and then you will understand how it works. If the machine was made by Oracle, for instance, and it is very productive, and it has a very high present value, Then entrepreneurs think, let us see, what would it cost us to acquire the necessary factors of production, to build the machine, recombine them, and bring the machine to culmination? If it turns out that, due to technological innovations, etc., the cost is very low, then an enormous profit margin exists in the technology sector. Entrepreneurs will rush en masse to buy the productive factors necessary to build computers, from the services of technical engineers to silica components or whatever, and a massive quantity of new equipment will reach the market. Clearly, as a result, the marginal revenue it produces will be lower and lower, owing to the larger supply. This will continue until the marginal cost tends to equal the marginal product. With respect to both the specific case you have mentioned, computers, and the housing sector, which hits us close to home, the process I have just described can help us to understand many of our experiences.